What's going on, guys? MikeO back with Hobby Talk Episode 2. I'm joined on the podcast today by Nate Blackford, an experienced card collector who has a vast Barry Bonds collection. We'll also discuss the rise in interest in the 1990s insert cards, and we'll talk a little bit about the YouTube sports card collectors community and all it has to offer, especially Nate's popular Baseball Card Junkies TV. I do have a favor to ask you guys listening right now, whether you're listening on iTunes, Google Play, Soundcloud, or YouTube. I'd appreciate your feedback if you could take a moment to let me know how things are going. Also, if you have any suggestions for upcoming topics, I'm all ears. And, of course, if you could subscribe to the podcast, that would always be appreciated. So now we're joined by Nate Blackford. Nate, I appreciate you joining the podcast. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It should be a lot of fun.
So, Nate, you're pretty active on social media. You're a member of various Facebook groups, but I think what you're best known for on social media is the YouTube community and your part in that. You have your channel, Tops85401, which is quite successful. I know a lot of people enjoy that channel. You've been doing that for years and years, but you also have a channel that you started, and you're co-host of Baseball Card Junkies TV, a channel that I know a lot of baseball card collectors across the country and probably, honestly, across parts of the world tune into when you guys do shows. And tell us a little bit about how you got started with YouTube and then how Baseball Card Junkies TV got started.
All right, well, I mean, I got started on YouTube similar to a lot of stories I hear from other YouTubers, and that is just, I remember just watching YouTube videos and searching for like videos about baseball cards, and I just found a bunch of channels I liked a lot. And when I was first watching YouTube, I didn't really have the ability to post my own videos on YouTube. I didn't have like a webcam or anything, but as soon as I had that ability, I started making videos of my own, and I didn't really know what the community was about when I first started making videos, so it's just something that I kind of caught on to. And as far as my two channels, the Baseball Card Junkies TV channel is something I started with my buddy Eric, I'd say about, I don't know, 2 years ago or so now. It's been a while. And we decided to start that channel because we wanted to kind of be ambassadors to the hobby and help people that are either getting started with the hobby or people that are getting back into the hobby. I mean, almost every adult collector, at least, almost every adult collector, I would say, has at some point left the hobby and then returned. And anytime that happens, because there's so much change in the hobby, there's just a lot you need to learn when you get back into the hobby. And then, of course, if you're a new collector, it's just going to be a complete mystery on what's going on. So we try to provide a lot of information to teach people about the hobby, because there's a lot to know.
Yeah, and for those listening on some of the various platforms, so this podcast, for people who aren't aware, is published on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, and also YouTube. So a lot of people might not even be aware of the vast resources of YouTube. It's just something, it's an incredible resource for collectors. You can reach out to other people, and you can connect to other people, and you can kind of be entertained by fellow collectors. But beyond that, you can really learn a lot. You can catch up with Nate's Baseball Card Junkies TV is a great example. And like you mentioned, being an ambassador for the hobby, kind of getting people back into it, or even younger kids who enjoy social media, and that's their way of finding out stuff and finding information. It's just amazing, the resources on YouTube and all the stuff you can learn, because there's so many people on there, there's so many collectors, and everyone has their little niche that they're into. Some people are into grading, some people are into raw cards, some people are into rookie cards, some people are into autographs, inserts, all sorts of stuff. And you know, when you have all these people who focus on little groups, you can learn a lot about all those various parts of the hobby, because the hobby, as you said, is continuously evolving, growing, changing.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just so many, like you said, subcategories of collecting. I mean, I've learned about hundreds, or well, not hundreds, but dozens of different subcategories of collecting over the years. So I'm always surprised about how many different ways and different things that you could collect, which makes it a lot of fun. It's not one-dimensional.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about Baseball Card Junkies TV, because I know that's really interesting to me. It's entertaining. I mean, I've been watching you for years, and you know, I've gotten to know you over the years, which has been great. Meeting you in person at the National was incredible. But your regular channel, love it, watch it all the time. But I notice a lot of people are finding Baseball Card Junkies TV, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that surpassed your regular channel in terms of subscribers. I could be wrong on that, but I know I've seen people in different forums and stuff in the past where they're talking about, there's a discussion going on about, you know, how did you get into YouTube or various stuff like that, and I see Baseball Card Junkies TV mentioned a lot. So that's something that obviously comes up in the search a lot. And I know I've actually met people at card shows who've talked about YouTube, and they've brought up Baseball Card Junkies TV. So it's certainly an interesting channel for sure.
Yeah, it's got kind of a catchy name too. And you know what's funny about the name of that channel is Eric's wife is the one that came up with the name for that channel. So my co-host, we were like trying to think of different names for it, but I mean it was just kind of catchy, and we decided that would be a good one to call it. And I mean, really, I mean, as collectors, we're a bunch of junkies, so we can all relate to the name of the channel, I think.
Yeah, and it, like you said, it's catchy. It sounds great, and you know, I think there's a dynamic whenever you're on screen with another person. You can kind of bounce ideas back off one another, and I think that definitely is a little different. You know, most channels on YouTube in terms of baseball cards, you know, it's a single person doing it themselves. Not all of them. Some, you have some father-son stuff like that, but I think two of you doing it together is definitely great. And now with the way YouTube has evolved over the years, you can pre-record something and set it and publish it whenever, and people can tune in. But you also have the option now for live videos, and I think that's kind of made things more interesting as well, where you guys could be at a card show and pop on. You can do a live show, and you know, or if something comes up, say someone breaks a record or something new comes out, you pick something up, or you just have time, you guys can hop on live and interact with everyone who's watching the channel. And I think that allows people to do questions, ask questions, and get them answered immediately. And you know, I think that is appealing to people because they can, you know, get your thoughts on stuff immediately.
Yeah, we every time we go live, time goes by so fast. Like I'll look at the clock and I'll be like, wow, we've been on here for like an hour and a half. Where did the time go? And so yeah, we have a lot of fun when we go live. And also a funny thing, like what you were saying about having a channel with two people, is a lot of times when we're recording videos, I forget that I'm recording a video because it's just like Eric and I hanging out and talking and us just being real candid. And I think that's what a lot of people like about it as well, is just us being us, you know, just a couple of regular guys that collect cards and, you know, just doing and saying things that a lot of collectors can relate to.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So you guys out there want to go just hop on YouTube. You search Tops 85401. His channel's going to pop up. You search baseball cards in general. I'm sure both his channels will pop up, but Baseball Card Junkies TV for sure. I know that's always at the top of the search engine, and I highly recommend checking it out. It's a lot of fun. It's entertaining, and beyond that, you get a lot of great information, a lot of insight from a longtime collector, which is what I want to jump into next, Nate. How long have you been collecting cards?
Well, I mean, like the first time I was introduced to the hobby like in 1978. You know, like it's just a little feller, but my dad would like buy packs for me, but then I didn't really collect much. I mean, I'd look through my dad's old vintage cards from when he was a kid, but when I really got started in collecting was 1983, when I was buying packs with my own money and, you know, saving up all the nickels and dimes and quarters and dollars and whatever it was and go and get 2-3 packs at a time. So 83 is the year I really started collecting.
And then you mentioned when you were talking about Baseball Card Junkies TV, the trend is that people collect, and then they usually take a break at some point in their life for whatever reason. Maybe you go to school, maybe you get married, maybe you have kids, maybe you just lose interest for a short while. But it seems that most people that collect at one point always seem to come back. Is that a situation you found yourself in?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've actually met a collector that has collected continuously from the first time they started up and through their adulthood. But for me, when I was 18, I stopped collecting, or 1990, so I was 17 or 18 years old. And I didn't collect at all. I mean, I might have bought a few things here and there, but for the most part, I did not collect at all. And then I picked it back up in late 1997 and was going full force by the time 1998 rolled around.
Yeah, it's an interesting hobby, and it's something that I collected. I got started in 1989 was the first time I was introduced, and kind of took off from there in that early 90s boom with my dad. And then I want to say the early 2000s kind of got out of it, slowly got out of it, but I was always collecting something sports related. I still went to the Phillies, have charity sales every year, so I was still doing autograph stuff with that, and I was big into the McFarlane figures for a while, starting lineups, all that stuff. So I did take a break from cards for a while, but I found myself in the same situation at some point. Just got started slowly, and then next thing you know, a few years go by, and you go, wow, yeah, I've amassed a lot of cards again.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what really got me started back into collecting was like the big home run numbers. I remember in '97, McGwire hit, I think it was 58 home runs, and Griffey was up there. And then by the time spring came in 1998, everybody was talking to McGwire, assuming that he was going to break Roger Maris's single-season home run record, like at the very beginning of the baseball season, because of how many homers he had been hitting the previous 2 years. And then that just got me collecting full force, man. After that, it was on.
Yeah, I remember McGuire's stuff just absolutely taking off back there. You couldn't.
Yeah.
It's. I think I remember seeing like base cards going for like $7 and $10 that you could probably yank out of a dime box now, and probably could have gotten out of a dime box before, but it was insane. But it was a fun time for baseball for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed that summer.
So, speaking of home run records, it's well known that you are a big Barry Bonds fan, Barry Bonds collector. Do you consider yourself a Barry Bonds super collector? And also, do you have a number off the top of your head how many unique Barry Bonds cards are part of your collection?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely consider myself a Bonds super collector. And it's funny you ask how many I have. I got approximately 4,600 unique cards of Bonds, which is a pretty decent sized collection. But I've been considering myself a Bonds super collector since before I had 1,000 unique Barry Bonds cards. So, but that's before I really understood what a super collector was. But yeah, I do enjoy collecting them.
Yeah, you certainly have an impressive Barry Bonds collection, which again, if you want to see some of Nate's collection, you can check it out on social media. I know you've shown them off in the past on the YouTube videos, which, again, I'm harping on the YouTube stuff, but you can go back and watch old videos and kind of get information and see things evolve in the hobby, so that's something that's always fun to do. Barry Bonds, I find it fascinating collecting. Like, I can't stay as focused as you do with the Barry Bonds stuff. I don't even know what I have as a collection. I collect autograph cards, I collect rookie cards, I collect graded cards. I certainly have a focus on Phillies, being a Phillies fan, which is, I've always enjoyed being a Phillies fan, other than when you were celebrating in 2010. That was a little heartbreaking. But, specific player-wise, like Phillies-wise, I do collect Chase Utley cards, but I'll go out there occasionally and pick up some cards, whether it's on eBay or comc.com, which is a great resource for cards, and I'll just, add 20 to the collection, and I'll toss them in a binder, but I don't stay focused on them. So how do you stay so focused on just, the Barry Bonds
Well,
collection. And I know you do other stuff, but you definitely have
no,
something
that's definitely.
that keeps you up to date on the Bonds cards.
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and I mean, for every big collector, there has to be a mentor, right? And so I mean, even though I'm very knowledgeable in the hobby, I have a friend of mine that is significantly more knowledgeable than me in the hobby, and he actually has a significantly larger Barry Bonds collection. And if you watch my videos, you'll hear me talk about him a lot. So he has taught me so much about the hobby. And also, I mean, even though I have 4,600 unique Bonds cards, there's always a lot more cards of him that I can find, because he has probably 15,000 different cards out there to collect. So I don't even have a third of what there is available for me to collect from Bonds. So the focus is trying to be, or trying to collect every card of his that's been produced that's minimum numbered to 10. I mean, if it's numbered to 10 or less, I'm not going to worry about it. And then there is a lot of cards out there that I could pick up, but I just decide not to, just because there's so many cards of his still out there for me to collect. I mean, there's just a huge checklist for him. And I mean, anytime you have a superstar that played in the era that Bonds played, you're going to have a wide range of different cards and different things to collect. I mean, there's stuff from all the way to the oddball 80s stuff. He was a dominant player throughout the 90s, so he's in vast number of insert sets and parallel sets in the 90s, all the way up into the 2000s. And then in the last few years, I mean, he's actually had a few new releases from all the different companies. So, yeah, I mean, there's plenty out there to keep me focused, and it's just fun trying to chase and find cards I've never seen or that I've always wanted.
It's kind of mind-boggling how many cards are still out there that you don't have, considering the guy hasn't played in more than a decade. Like, it's amazing the variety of cards they've made over the years and how much there is still to choose from.
Yeah, and I mean, it's taken me 20 years to learn what's out there and what's available. I mean, it takes time to learn about all the stuff that's out there from the time frame that he played, which was 86 through 2007. I mean, yeah, I mean, the card manufacturers itself went through a huge renaissance in that time frame, and Bonds was a part of it. So there's a lot out there.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of answers what I was going to ask you next. You know, the fact that Bonds is retired, and I don't know what the deal is, but they do still produce cards of him, but not a lot, if that makes sense. He's in certain higher end products of baseball, but it seems like most of what's released is autograph cards, and they're a little pricey because they're usually numbered 10, 25, no more than that. You don't see many base cards anymore, but you know, I guess if you still have a couple thousand cards to chase down from all the cards that are produced, that doesn't become much of a problem. You know, the Barry Bonds chase to add to your collection really, it's not taking a hit by the fact that they haven't produced all that many cards in recent years.
You know, it's funny. It's actually the card companies are doing me a huge favor and this is coming from a single player super collector, but really the card companies have done me a huge service by not making new cards of him, because it would definitely, you know, I mean, I'd be chasing all the new releases where there's so many old releases out there. You know, it'd be harder to try to pick up all the older stuff from his playing days. And really, his playing days are my main focus.
Yeah, I'm sure if someone put out something, you'd take a look for sure. But it sounds like you like a lot of that older stuff, which we'll jump into in a few minutes. But just wanted to bring up. So I'm sure you're well aware that Barry Bonds is not exactly the most popular of athletes. I wouldn't consider him a universally beloved athlete. Does that ever bother you at all, or has anyone ever given you a hard time, like, oh, you collect Barry Bonds, he's a bum, this and that?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while I get like a rude comment on YouTube, but for the most part, people pretty much leave it alone. I don't think people want to upset me. People don't really talk, say anything bad about Bonds unless it's like, ah, man, to be honest, I can't even think of the last time someone made a rude comment about Bonds to me. But I have had that happen before. And, I mean, if when you collect someone like Bonds, someone with a dynamic personality, someone that, ruffled the feathers of a lot of media people, that people, that people are going to give you crap about it if you're going to go on social media and say, this is a guy that I collect. So that's pretty much to be expected. And I mean, overall, I've experienced that at a minimum capacity. I mean, really almost very little have people given me a hard time about it. So
yeah, I was just curious because, we're talking baseball here, and I am, over the years, I've definitely shifted towards mostly baseball collecting. Being a Phillies fan, I do collect that, but I like Hall of Famers. I don't discourage any type of baseball collecting, but from a football point of view, I am a Patriots fan. Just for whatever reason, grew up a Patriots fan back in the Drew Bledsoe era. Naturally, just continued being a fan, and obviously Tom Brady came into the league and he's had himself a hell of a career, and the Patriots are, been pretty good for quite a while. But I do notice if I am looking at New England stuff at some of the local shows here in the Philadelphia area, you get a comment here or there, but there's a little bit of jealousy towards the Patriots in Philadelphia, especially based on a Super Bowl result, which at this point is over 10 years old. So I was just curious. I know at national events, usually no one really says anything because people are from all over. And with social media, you're going to get stuff here or there no matter what. You could collect anything or everything, and you're going to get someone from time to time that, just feels like trying to upset someone, but I let things roll off my back. I was just curious about you because obviously Bonds can be a hot topic, and you hear people talk about them this time of the year every year with the Hall of Fame vote coming up, and so we'll see how that continues to evolve over the years too.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if and when he makes it to the Hall of Fame, which I really think he will be a Hall of Famer, especially with some of the guys that are in there now.
Yeah, and I wonder if that will do anything to his collectability or value-wise.
Well,
I don't know if it would have a big change because I feel like most people, know who Bonds is and what he did. So people who are a fan consider him a Hall of Famer, and some people don't like him. They're not going to collect him anyway. So I don't know if it would change his value much. It certainly wouldn't hurt it.
It will have a huge impact, actually, because last year when he got a vote of 54%, all his rookie cards, his key rookie cards and a Gem Mint 10 at least, pretty much tripled in value. I mean, you can't touch the prices now where you could get a year ago on all that. And a lot of his inserts too, I've seen probably about a 25 to 50% increase in what I'm having to pay for some of his tougher to find inserts. But I don't know if that's because that's the trend on the cards from that era, or if that's because it's Bonds. It's hard to say, or maybe it's a combination of both.
I would think probably PSA set registries. PSA set registries seem to be affecting the hobby quite a bit value-wise. And you mentioned the Hall of Fame stuff, and I guess if he were to be elected to the Hall of Fame at some point, he would then, all his rookies and different stuff would then be eligible for some of these PSA set registries, the Hall of Fame ones, and then people need to add them to their collections, so then people are out there shopping for them. So I guess you are right in certain aspects. It probably would increase his hobby value quite a bit. I've noticed it with Jim Thome with these early returns. It looks like at this point Thome and Chipper Jones are both virtual locks to be elected this year, and I'm seeing Thome stuff kind of creep up a bit. So I've been keeping an eye. Some of the new releases have him in a Phillies uniform, and he hasn't been in autograph certified products much over the last few years. And I've noticed every time, we have new votes coming out, I see his price creeping up a little bit. So Hall of Fame can have an impact on the hobby.
Yeah, that's nothing new. That's been going on for years in the hobby as far as like the Hall of Fame vote, and you see a spike in a player's card performance prior to, any type of Hall of Fame vote.
So another thing that you're into, we've gone over your bonds collecting, but 1990s inserts. It seems that you've been into them lately. Not saying you ever got out of them, but I've seen a big increase both on YouTube and Facebook. You have a group over there on Facebook, or you're part of a group about 1990s inserts, and it seems like there's a renewed interest in it. Is that something that I'm imagining, or do you think there's an actual renewed interest in insert cards from the 1990s?
Yeah, I mean, insert cards from the 90s. I think it's like a nostalgic thing. Like what I'm saying is like in the 1980s, you saw vintage cards go from, nothing to decent value, and now you're seeing that with cards from the 90s, because people that are my age, that were collecting back in the 90s, are now 20 years older, and now we have the income to buy those cards that we could never afford when we were younger. And so you're seeing, and then of course, like we talked about earlier, people that left the hobby and that come back. On my Baseball Card Junkies TV channel, I've talked with a lot of people that said that they've been out of the hobby for approximately 20 years, and now they're coming back. And so, those collectors are chasing after those 90s inserts. But then there's always the cards that set precedent. And what I mean, like you see a card that sells for a lot of money out of a certain set, and then because there's like a lot of hype about that particular sale of a card, you get other players from the same set start to get popular, and it kind of builds value in those cards as well. Just kind of like the 52 Mantle kind of brought interest into the 52 top sets, in addition to Mantle as a collected player throughout the 50s and 60s. So you see a lot of that with the 90s cards as well. But there's definitely an increase in the popularity of those cards. I mean, I think in the last 2 years, you're seeing stuff that was selling for $30, literally selling for 150 to $200, $300. I could give you some set names if you want to know specific sets that are doing that. But yeah, just a complete surge in pricing in some of these cards. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, you see stuff that was selling for $30 selling for 150 to $200 plus, sometimes $300, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, and I think part of that card up. I think certainly nostalgic factor is a big deal. Anytime you get a couple decade to 2 decades removed from something, people start finding it again. And I feel like there's almost a resurgence in card collecting as a whole. I think there's something about the young guys in baseball right now. It's an exciting time in baseball. You have some just young, exciting teams, fun teams. The World Series the last 2 years has been, really entertaining with some just really great young players. And, I don't think cards are maybe necessarily back to the popularity, of course, of that boom in the early 90s, late 80s. But I do see more kids becoming interested. And I think part of that is also the parents becoming interested again. And they're ones who were collecting back in the early 90s, mid 90s, even late 90s. So, like you said, the nostalgic factor, people go, oh, I remember these. And I think that's definitely a key factor. Collecting and all that stuff.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of set collectors as well. So if you get a tough to find 90s card, you're a player collector, you also have to fight the set collectors. There was a card the other day, about 2 weeks ago, a Bonds card that sold for $400, and the guy that won it, is somebody that the people in the Bonds collecting community is not familiar with on eBay. So it was obviously a set collector that paid a huge premium for this card that was a Bonds card. It was not even a Bonds collector that won it on eBay. So you see a lot of that too. You got the player collectors and the set collectors battling it out.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing too is you look at all these brand new products, and every single set is like they got one of ones, they got numbered to 5, numbered to 10, numbered to 100, numbered to 200, 300, all that stuff, all kinds of parallels. And if you look at the 90s, a lot of these cards sometimes are not numbered, but even if they are numbered, they're numbered to 500, 1,000, still, you even have like the Donruss Elite cards in the early 90s, which aren't huge dollar cards unless they're like great at gem mint, but I mean those things are numbered to what 10,000 or something. But there's still an interest, and even though some of these cards they produced more than they do of the current stuff, I think so much of it over the years has been just stowed away in a collection or in a collection that was given away or sold off, and I do think a lot of the cards are kind of lost in a way, you know. It's not to the exact extreme of, you know, the 50s and 60s where mothers were throwing out their kids' cards that they beat up in bicycle spokes, but there is a slight aspect of that where I think, you know, just because a card's numbered to maybe 500 doesn't mean there's 500 available. They're not all popping up on eBay. They might just pop around for sale occasionally.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, if you're going from, like, 1998 and on, and typically, like, 98 is where you really started seeing cards numbered to 100 more commonly. So from, like, 98 on, cards numbered to 100, maybe to about 2003, 2004, somewhere in that era. Yeah, you're right. Those cards that are numbered to 100 or less are all in collections, and even though they're, you know, it seems like 100 is a lot, you don't see them. You never see them. And then also, in the 90s, people were still hoarding wax boxes. You know, like in the late 80s. So there's a lot of wax that hasn't been broken still from that era, and so there's stuff still sealed in packs. So there's all kinds of factors involved with that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of collections from the 90s don't surface. I mean, typically, this might sound harsh, but there's one of two things that is going to make a collection surface. Either one, somebody gets a divorce, okay, or and then the collection has to be sold off to, you know, because it has to be split. The proceeds have to be split. Or two, somebody passes away. And that's when collection, because what you'll find is on a lot of these tough to find 90s inserts, you won't see anything for months, 6 months. And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of cards will just show up, like just a whole bunch of them. And it's always from one seller. And it's typically a seller that's not even a collector of that player. So it's obviously someone that bought a giant collection from, you know, like a couple getting a divorce or someone that passed away. That's typically how you see it. So it's really interesting when they do come on the marketplace, the format in which you see them come on the marketplace. It's usually not collectors liquidating the collection.
It's just fascinating to see how cards have evolved. You know, every era kind of has their own, you know, you have the 50s and 60s and 70s. You have the early 80s, then you have kind of the abundance of the late 80s and the early 90s. And now you have the 90s is kind of what we're calling it, but I would say it's a couple years into the 90s before you had a tremendous amount of inserts. And,
yeah,
you know, that's kind of got its own little era now. And then you're going to have, eventually it'll be interesting, in my opinion, to see what eventually happens with the 2000s, the current day cards, all this stuff. And we'll see what happens in 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, the people that collect now, or the young people that collect now, it'll be nostalgic for them, to what is being produced now. And also, you got to remember, like 20 years down the road from now, all the cards that are numbered to 5 or 10 now that are plentiful because they're being released right now, you know, and you got all the breakers that are breaking this stuff. That stuff's, you're not going to see it surface in 10, 15, 20 years from now. It's going to be hidden in collections. So, I mean, every era is going to have their wave of insurgence of popularity. And it's, I mean, even in the junk wax era at some point, I don't know when, but at some point it's going to have a surgence of popularity.
And I enjoy the junk wax era because I grew up on it. You know, I know that it doesn't have a tremendous value, but every now and then you get a box for like $2 or $3 at a flea market or maybe a card show if someone's dumping a whole bunch of it. There's something fun about busting a box open and just laughing at some of the old players, the old names, and you know, it can be fun. You know, doesn't mean there's a whole lot of value at it, but if you can have a half hour of fun for $3, that ain't bad.
Not bad at all, Mike. Not bad at all.
So you teased a little bit about some sets that are popular, and we're going to wrap things up here shortly, but what are some of those sets from the 90s that you've really seen take off?
Oh man, okay, like the essential credentials then and now from EX.
EX,
Those
what was it?
ones,
EX 2000 or EX 2001? I
yeah,
forget what they were called.
yeah, the EX.
That was from
And
Fleer, right?
yeah, well, in 1997 it was called 2000 EX, and then they just went to EX. Yeah, and then you got like the precious metal gems from Metal Universe. Those cards are really, yeah, I mean, man, those things are selling for a lot of money. And then you got like the mirror, like from Leaf Certified, the mirror golds and stuff like that, like from 97, 96. Those ones are those sell for quite a bit of money if you could find them. And like just like some of the sets that have like blown my mind. There's this one set from Pinnacle from 1996 Pinnacle. It's a Skyline set, and like when I was talking about setting precedent, like a card, you know, certain card setting precedent. I know the Michael Jordan from that set. It's a different sport, but the Michael Jordans sell for hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars. And now players like Bonds, that card used to be like a $30 card. Now you got to pay 150, $200 for that card. So that's another one. And then, oh God, there's all kinds of
I've been
sets out
checking out
there.
some of based on your Facebook group, which I don't post as much in there as I should, but I definitely look at the post and it brings me back. I love like the Flair showcase, people showing off different Flair showcase parallels, and it like brings me
Oh
back to
yeah,
those
yeah.
sets.
Yeah,
And
the ones numbered to 100, those ones sell pretty well. I mean, those are not, they're not super expensive, not like the EX and some of the other ones. And then like you know about the Crusade, the 98 Donruss Crusade. I mean, those ones had relatively high numbering, but the the cards, what they sell for to what the numbering in it is pretty high. And especially because they were from 98, they weren't like earlier year release. But I think those sell for so much just because they're so damn beautiful. Those cards are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the shine
I
on,
like the hot gloves as well. I know
yeah,
some
the
people
hot
have been showing
gloves.
them off.
Yeah, I mean, those ones aren't super expensive, but they're really, I mean, they're like $20, $30 cards. But,
Yeah, I just
you know, if
remember,
you get the right year.
I just remember like I don't know, it's probably like the early 2000s. They were like a lot of them were like a buck or two because I think there
Yeah,
people just had so many and they were like I don't know what to do with it, and now people are going, oh, kind of wish I
yeah.
hung on to them.
Some years, I say some years on those hot gloves aren't worth that much, but if you get the right year, they're gonna have some good value.
I've been
So,
I've been lately checking out some of the Donruss Elite cards. Not so much like the mid '90s, but the early '90s, which they made a ton of them, but most of them are probably still in a warehouse somewhere on a pallet because they made so much in like '92 Donruss.
yeah, it's
There's
funny.
probably more
There's like,
cases of that than human beings on Earth. But
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, like the '91 Donruss Elite. I think you got one per 52 boxes. So you'd have to open up 52 boxes of 36 packs per box, right? So you do the math on those just to pull one Donruss Elite. And you're right, they printed so much of that stuff. Probably half of it hasn't even been opened, and then the half that has been opened, you know, I mean that those were 50-cent packs back then. So if you got a kid that opened the packs and then the parents threw out the cards, because people are still throwing out cards in the 90s. So who knows how many of them are actually around, but you could probably divide that by maybe 10 as far as how many mint examples are floating around to
yeah,
be collected.
I remember them being like the first like really rare insert card that I ever chased. I know I got a Kirby Puckett out of a pack one time, and my brother got Joe Carter. My brother used to like Joe Carter a lot, and this is back in like 1990, 1991. I scolded him for that in 1993 at the end of that season as a Phillies fan. But I just
Damn.
remember always opening the stuff with my dad and brothers, and like the Elite they were so hard to get. We were fortunate enough to get a couple. So now when I see them, especially like 90, 91, 92, 93, I'll always check in on them. And then, I look at them, and another retro thing I've been following lately is actually the starting lineup cards that came with the action figures.
Oh man, some of those.
If you find those in like
ones.
Gem Mint, which is tough because they were put in those clamshells, so a lot of them come with bent corners. But that's a sneaky set that I don't know if as many people are aware of yet. But those old starting lineup cards, if you can find them in really good condition of popular players, those cards hold some decent value. So I check them out once in a while too, because I used to be huge into the starting lineups, and unfortunately I sold off a bunch of the starting lineup cards years and years ago. I still have some, but not as many as I used to, unfortunately.
Yeah, some of those cards are really those are like the good oddball things out there that you could collect, and if you know what to look for, yeah, some of those starting lineups they're tough to find, like you said, because they were distributed in those clamshells with the toy.
And then if kids opened them, usually they were opening it up for the toy, for the action figure, and the cards were not kept, they didn't take care of it, or in some cases might not have even kept the card where they did keep the figure. Another thing that you're really into, and these started in the 90s, is refractor cards. And I specifically want to talk about 1993 Baseball's Finest, the first edition of Topps Finest. Those refractors are absolutely stunningly beautiful, and two, really difficult to pull. They were one of those things, I don't even know if you necessarily got one per box, unlike nowadays where you get refractors in virtually every pack. But I'm pretty certain you have a Barry Bonds refractor, don't you?
I basically have every Barry Bonds refractor out there that features just Barry Bonds on the card. So I mean, there are a bunch of refractors that have multiple players on it, including Bonds, that I'm missing. But the ones that just have Bonds, if it's a refractor, I'll have it, including the 1993 Finest.
I just love that 93 Finest set, and the refractors are amazing. That's another one that now and then I'll keep an eye out for. I don't necessarily look at it on a daily basis or even a weekly basis, but now and then I'll just start searching 93 Finest, and if you can find a refractor at a good price, it's worth jumping on, because sometimes even the commons, I think, go in the 20s. You'll see, maybe.
Well, those
more.
are probably set collectors, but they only, like, this might sound like a lot, especially for what those 93 Finest refractors sell for, but they printed 241, I think, of each one. They're not numbered or anything. That's just someone did the math. They figured out how the odds of pulling a refractor divided by how many packs or cases were released, and they figured there's about 241 of each card. And yeah, those cards are absolutely amazing. They are absolutely beautiful. I love how, like, on the older refractors, when you have like an outline of the player, the card itself is etched. It's almost, it has a texture to it, even though the card itself is smooth. Visually, it has texture to it, and the 93 Finest refractors, depict that beautifully on their cards.
Yeah, I love the look of them, and they still make all kinds of amazing refractors, but there's nothing to me better than a 1993 Finest refractor. But
yeah,
some of those
is one of the better colors.
Some of those atomic refractors years later are incredible too. But we could go on for hours upon hours. Nate, I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much for taking the time to join the show. And once again, people can find you on YouTube, Tops85401, and also Baseball Card Junkies TV. I suspect you'll have some videos coming up, correct?
Yeah. Eric and I are trying to make time to make a new video on Baseball Card Junkies. But yeah, I'm always releasing videos on my Tops85 401 channel. It's a little bit harder on the Baseball Card Junkies TV channel, just because it requires the two of us finding time to hang out at the same time. But when we can do it, we put out as many videos as possible on that channel as well.
Thank you guys for checking out this episode. Really appreciate it. Want to thank Nate one more time for joining the podcast. Check out Nate's channel, Tops85401 on YouTube, Baseball Card Junkies TV on YouTube. You can check out my channel, MikeO, on YouTube. And subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Soundcloud, or follow it on YouTube, whatever you do. I appreciate you listening. Have yourselves a great one.